Welcome to the MotUS Edge, where we celebrate business, primarily youth sports facility management, leadership, and motivation. Co-hosted by Stacy Rowe, Cole Stott, Kevin Brubaker, and Casey Jones. We are here to fill your cup with knowledge, laughter, affirmations, and comfort knowing that you're not alone. You can and will succeed with the MotUS Edge.
Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to the MotUS Edge. I'm Stacy Rowe, here as usual with Cole, Kevin, and Casey. We are excited to talk about today's podcast topic, navigating events. How to help your coaches deal with a winning routine, a failed routine, dealing with parents and event officials at competitions.
That's a hard topic.
That is quite the topic.
Stacy, you probably dealt with this a lot more than the rest of us.
Man, yeah, I feel like I've been dealing with it the last couple of weeks, and it can be a tough thing. You know, competition, especially some of these large competitions, you know, Cheer Sport, NCA, Cheer Expo, Nashville, you know, these big competitions where, you know, there's a lot of pressure, and we're a competitive gym, so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and our coaches put a lot of pressure on themselves, and they work really hard, and the kids work really hard. And, you know, sometimes we forget, though, that all of our competitors, they work really hard, too. So, you know, everybody
wants to win.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't, then, you know, that's a totally different thing. That's a totally different set of emotions. But, man, I remember coming off of Cheer Sport this year, and we just had such an array of emotions with different coaches because, you know, some of them had the weekend of their lives, and then others did not. You know, and it's tough. Like, you're at Cheer Sport, you're there all weekend, sometimes pulling 14, 15-hour days. We had coaches that were, you know, 25, 30,000 steps in a day. Myself at Cheer Sport, I was 50,000 steps over 2 days. So you're physically tired.
What's that equate to in miles?
Oh, man, steps? I think it was close to, you know, over 20 miles.
I was going to say the average human walks 5 miles in 10,000 steps. So that'd be 25,000 miles approximately.
We did a thing years ago at Cheer Sport.
Yes, 25 miles.
Casey just walked around the planet Earth
at Cheer Sport. It was great training, though. Great training for when I climbed some mountains in summer. But man, coming off of that event, I recall the Monday after, and like I said, some coaches are just so pumped and so happy. But then I remember distinctly we had one, and it was like, you know, one of the managers called and like, "Hey, Coach such and such." She's freaking out a little bit, and she's kind of reaching out to her co-coaches, and she was a head coach. She was reaching out to her co-coaches, and she's just going to take a step back, and she's going to, you know, she's clearly not getting the job done. And I was like, hold on, this is a great coach. Like, she coaches 2 teams, and both of them got second, and I mean really, really close seconds. Wow. But then I kind of started thinking about it, like during that week, literally on one of her teams, she had to replace 3 people because of illness, injury, all these, like the perfect storm that week. And then her other team also had to replace someone. And then, like I said, both teams went and got second by 0.02, you know, just right there at it. And she's tired. She's upset. She's ridden this emotional roller coaster. She's had a full week of all of this. So then Monday, all of that just comes pouring out. And it's like she's questioning whether she's a good coach or not, you know. So you've got coaches coming off of these weekends on the highest of highs, like I'm the greatest coach in the world, or on the lowest of lows where, like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm the most terrible coach, you know. And it was funny. And I called her, and we had it literally took about 30 seconds to kind of shift those gears. I'm like, listen, you're a great coach. Like, and you feel terrible today because of these close seconds. I was like, so spend the day feeling terrible, and then wake up tomorrow and you got to go. Like, these kids need you. And then that's really all she needed to hear. And I think it motivated her, and she was ready to go again. So just such an array, like I said, such an array of emotions.
It's hard too. I feel like when you go to an event like Cheersport or NCA or Worlds or, just whatever, pick your big event. It doesn't matter. You go to these events and you've got a dozen coaches, let's say there or more, but let's just say a dozen. And like you said, you've got some that are so successful. Their teams did great. They won. Or maybe they didn't, but they achieved what they set out to do and they're excited. And then you have coaches that aren't. And that dynamic is really hard too, because at the end of the day, you want everybody to feel good and celebrate the program and what the program is doing. And you've got, somebody salty at the dinner table because they didn't do as well. And you got this person over here that's like, woohoo, I'm excited. Best day of my life. And it's like a family. It's like kids, when you have a kid that did something really well and a kid that didn't, achieve as well. And you got to try to manage through that. It's the same with the coaches, I feel like sometimes.
I used to joke in my own head back when NCA was a little smaller and ended a little earlier in the day, we would all go to dinner as a staff. And what you just described it perfectly, because like one end of the table is celebrating and, hey, let's order desserts and cakes and maybe they can put some candles on it. And the other end of the table is just like, and a full-on meltdown there. I felt like we needed to have two separate dinners. Like here's the sulking
winners, here's the losers.
Yeah, and here's the everybody feels good, because it's tough. Like people are on top of the world and want to celebrate, and then but these are also your friends and your family and who you spend 12 months with, and like it's like your own family household. When one kid's really happy and the other kid their boyfriend just broke up with them. Like.
I had somebody.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Cole.
I think it goes back to communication and really setting an expectation for your program. It's different for every program. Obviously, Casey owns, big, successful, top-notch program, and they're used to winning. So the expectation kind of is to win. But I think if you're a newer program or a less competitive program, there's nothing wrong with that. Like we've talked about before, you can really focus on other things about the experience and just the learning, and just the good times that they can have at the event, and not setting the expectation that, hey, all of a sudden this is our first year at this big event, and we expect to win. As I saw some posts in ASGA, probably a couple of weeks ago, of somebody being really upset that they were undefeated all year. Then they come into this event and they didn't win, but it's a different ball game. I'll use a personal story. Our first year, I used to coach the Premier Sharks, and we were, really successful and won like every event that we'd go to for like a 3 to 4 year period. And then finally, I was like, all right, let's go to NCA. And we're going into NCA. It's like, all right, we're going to take our show from Knoxville, Tennessee, across the country to NCA. We're going to, show everybody what the Sharks are all about. And we went, hit our routine, didn't make finals. This is back in the day when you had to make finals. You weren't guaranteed to compete 2 days.
Headed to the Champions Cup, baby.
Yeah, we're going to the Champions Cup, and everybody was just distraught. But being a little bit older, a little bit wiser now, I look back at setting expectations, set a realistic expectation so that when you don't do as well as you'd hope, it's everyone's not just devastated. And I do. Last month was high school nationals. My wife, Christy, coaches a high school team, and she did a really good job of that. Her and I would talk about it at home. And she's, their goal was to make finals, which I think there was like 60 teams in their division, and they made it into the top 7. Which that's amazing. Is you shouldn't start if you started off and said, "Hey, we're going to win." There's only one winner. Everybody wants to win, like Casey
and it's
said
so hard. I mean, that's the thing. Like everybody's good, and everybody's working hard, and everybody hires great choreographers, and everybody gets great music, and everybody's kids want to achieve the same results. So it's really, really hard to win these competitions.
Well, and part of that too, Casey, is that the top 7 or 8 teams in some of these bigger national events, they're separated by less than a point. I mean, you could easily be second or you could be 8th place and have hit both days, done amazing routines, done the best routines. And so it's so close at the top of some of those divisions that are so deep and so big that, one little bobble can cost you 9th or 10th. If 1st through 8th place has no falls and no bobbles and the division's so close, I mean, you're doing some of the same skills and some of the same things. So I know for me, one of my expectations when I coached, and granted I don't coach anymore, but part of that was, what is your experience for the entire year? Like Cole just said, it's like, competition is what we do. But if you're just comparing it to the wins or the losses, period, I think you can be miserable caught up in that. It's a lot about the journey. It's a lot about being on a team and being with your friends and getting to compete and go to competitions and have these experiences. And, winning is icing on the cake. But if that is your sole purpose, even in life, if your sole purpose in life is to win at everything you do, I know I lose more than I win just in work and in life and things. And so part of that is the journey. And part of that is the conversation you have within yourself and what you have with others and your staff and your parents and your athletes on what you're trying to get out of the total experience of doing All-Star Cheer.
Man, that's something we had to learn as a program. When we got started, Stingrays in 2002 of starting that brand, then some of what Cole described. I remember, taking the entire program out to NCA, and we had been very successful locally, and we went out there, and it was a different ball game. But Kevin, to your point, we had teams that literally, this was before Worlds, before Summit, before the One, before any end of year events and things like that. So NCA was the end all be all for a lot of programs, and we would have teams that would literally go undefeated, but get second place at NCA by 0.01. And you ask those kids, 3 days after that event, hey, how was your season? And it was terrible. We had the worst season ever. Really? You won 8 competitions and you got second at NCA by 0.01. Oh, it was terrible. Or vice versa. You lost everything and then you finally hit your stride and you win NCA, man, that's the best season we ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Kevin, I'd like to ask, Stacy, you go first this time.
I was going to say, I think that my best example of that is one of my dance routines. We called it the angel routine. And I know that y'all remember it. Kevin, Kevin's favorite routine ever.
It really is. It's literally my favorite dance routine of all time. And I've seen the best from BYU and Kentucky and Minnesota and every collegiate dance. But that routine, I literally made me cry at a regional at the Raleigh Convention Center on the judge stand. And I barely even knew Stacy back then. I liked her because she was a customer, but it's still my favorite. I want to meet the girl that was in the black and the white, someday. They're my idols. I don't even know who they are, but I love that routine. Anyway, Carrie, go on.
Becca Smith and Megan Holzer, actually. Okay. So they both worked in Knoxville for a time. But anywho, so that routine was great. And it was very different and very unique for its time. Nobody had really kind of seen anything
explain what it's
like
about, too, because I don't want people to think I'm just crying watching a dance routine. But it was so phenomenal.
So my mom passed away when I was 21. And so in 2011, we decided to do that routine. And it was the 10-year anniversary. And it was kind of like the stages of grief and the healing that you have to go through and the process that it takes to recover from such a impactful, person, that you lose in life. And so she had cancer. So there's a dancer that comes out on the floor that represented my mom. She had the bandana on her head and she was being assisted out on the stage. And typically that alone made the whole audience suck in air. You could hear everybody gasp because they thought that was real, and then she would sit down. There thousands of people throughout that season would come up to me and they're like, I thought that she was going to be escorted off the stage. And then she sat down and my heart, I literally grabbed the person next to me, what are we getting ready to watch? Then the whole routine starts and whatever. Anyway, the point is we were undefeated except for 2 competitions, Cheersport being one of them. And this was back when Cheersport had 100 and bajillion dance teams. It was one of the bigger places you could go to get a lot of dance competition. Sadly, Cheersport doesn't even have a dance competition anymore. But back then it was tremendous. A lot of dance competition. So we got 5th place and I was livid pissed. I was day one after day one, we were in 5th and I was so angry. And basically I felt like the judges riser was 25 football fields away from the stage and they couldn't really it didn't have the impact, whatever. Anyway, we went to Worlds and we were in 11th after day one, which was also extremely disappointing. And our team was really disappointed. And we ended up finishing in 9th. But what I took away from that in hindsight was it is still one of the most talked about, or most, not necessarily most talked about today, 14 years later, but one of the most recognizable. If you talk to anybody in the dance community, they're like, oh, do you remember that routine? They may not even know who the team was, or they may not know that I was the coach of that team, but like they know that routine. And so sometimes it isn't about the win, in that case, it was about the story and the impact and the powerful message of the routine, that it mattered and it meant something. And it kind of steered the industry in a direction of that type of routine. More and more people started doing things like that. Anyway, so I think that it can be about a lot of different things, and what you're trying to teach and what you're trying to do. And the dancers on that team still to this day, they're like, we learned so much about life and just so many things, because there was, in order for them to really be, I mean, Kevin, you cried on stage. The girls were crying on stage. They had to put themselves through that every time, and they learned so much about themselves and resilience and just grief and how to deal with grief and all of the different things. There were so many lessons just packed in a 2-minute and 15-second dance routine. So I think
that's incredible. I mean, it really is. That's an awesome story. And but you poured you talk about, man, we were in 5th and I was so upset because you poured so much into that, and then you take ownership of it, know? And I see that so much from our coaches. It's like, we try to teach team and use the words me and this and that and the other, but then sometimes it comes back and it's like, well, my pyramid, because man, I spent all summer drawing that out on paper, and I poured so much time into this, and it's personal with this person, and then the judge doesn't like it, and you're pissed because how dare, that's my pyramid. I owned it. I came up with it. It's the greatest pyramid on the planet, and this person up there on the riser who
disagrees.
They might not have been in a gym in 10 years or ever, and they disagree, and people take it personally. And it's hard not to, because that's the thing that I've come to realize. Our coaches, man, they work so hard, and it's not like they work hard for a week. It's not like they work hard for the week up to the competition. It is a full year. It is 1 year of hey, you're going to be with these kids 6 or 7 hours a week. You're going to be with your co-coaches 6 or 7 hours a week. And you're going to create this routine and build this routine and create, help create this music. And you're just so vested in everything. It is hard not to personalize that. So, and when you do, you're going to feel all of those emotions, the great ones of oh my gosh, I poured my heart and soul into it, and the entire crowd is going nuts and clapping. But then the negative ones of why didn't that guy sitting up on the stand like it?
One of the best pieces of advice I can give to anybody out there listening, I feel like, and it's hard to get to this space, but it's the truth. I feel like I've always felt this way, but I was reminded again of a simple statement. Just recently, I was hanging out with some of our premier coaches from our Northern Kentucky location, and one of the coaches there, her name was Brittany. We were talking about this very topic, and she was saying how her boss at work constantly reminds them that feedback is a gift. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. That's a good way to summarize it. And it is hurtful. And it is when you put all this time and effort into something and you pour yourself into it, you want it to be great. And you get this feedback, if you will, whether it's a score or a comment or a result that you disagree with, to remind yourself that feedback is a gift, and that you need that feedback in order to get better. And that just because, you think it's so great, doesn't mean that everyone thinks it's that great, and that it's okay that you think it's that great because you did put all that time and effort into it. But the feedback is a gift, and it's going to actually help you to get better. And so that after in my older years, not in 2011 when I was doing the angel routine, but as I got older, I got wiser, and I started to appreciate the feedback, because a lot of times people are afraid to give it to you. They don't want to tell you the truth, and you need to hear it to get better. And so anyway, feedback is a gift. So remind yourself of that, remind your coaches of that, because I think that that's crucial in success, in life, in sports, and everything.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is that, your parents and your athletes are a reflection of your attitude. And having been, I don't know, probably 300 competitions that I've been up on the judges stand or by the judges stand. And at those events, the judges, they really, really do care. They're great people. They genuinely want to help. So you don't have to take their feedback or their comments. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing. They really do want you to improve and get better. Right. One of the cool things, that we've started doing at the Cheer Expo events is really through MotUS, does a MotUS routine review, which we're really going to implement next season. But it's another genuine effort to come into that and approach that situation. Hey, here's my comment. I thought we had the best jump section in the world, but the judge told me I could do it better. Well, you can't do it better. And so, Kevin, I'd like to hear you speak to it. One of the things that I also noticed at AccuScore and now at ScoreCheck and at some of our events, but Kevin's had years and years of experience. We used to joke around at CheerSport. Kevin would do it. Then you'd get done with the day and there'd be a line of 50 people, like literally standing in line at midnight waiting to yell at Kevin.
I was probably in that line in 2011 for that dance routine.
Yeah, but how it's like what to be successful. How you approach that situation and how you approach the event director or whomever that person might be. Again, we're fortunate to have Kevin and he handles that really, really well. But Kevin, how would you recommend a coach when they're mad about their scores? They're obviously upset for a lot of stuff that we've talked about. They put their heart and soul into this. But how should they approach that person?
Well, I think one of the things is, and I used to say this literally all the time. I still say it to this day. Is like I love the NFL, and so Stacy had the greatest NFL season ever because the Eagles won, and so. But I love the NFL. I watch it every weekend. I enjoy it, and so even when we do events, I'm checking out scores and watching plays. And despite the NFL being one of the largest sports in the world in a multi-billion-dollar business, I watch video review every Sunday and they get it wrong. I'm like, goodness gracious, his one toe was out of bounds and you're saying that he was in bounds and it wasn't, and so they review it and they look at it and they still call it wrong. And I'm going, you know what, if they're going to make mistakes in front of a huge audience and they're a billion-dollar industry, they're human and they make mistakes. And so it's the same thing in cheer. And the reality is most coaches know more than most judges. Most coaches are doing this 7 days a week, 24/7 kind of thing. And they live it, eat it, breathe it, sleep it, love it. They created it. They do this. They're growing with it. Judges, despite some of the best judges, they don't do this 24/7. Yes, some judges coach and do, but most judges are doing this on the weekend. And yes, there's some incredibly knowledgeable judges. I think we have some of the best at the Cheer Expo. I praise what CJ and Tina do for us. And so, but the reality is I tell my coaches, you probably know more than the people that you're talking to. And sometimes that can be a frustrating thing for them, but it's the truth. And so it never helps to raise your voice. That helps nobody. It never helps to take it personally. That's really tough for especially younger coaches to understand. And the reality is like, it's not always going to go your way. And, what you can do to try to be able to make it as good of experience as possible. The reality is I learned this from Elaine and Joelle from World Cup. The crazy thing is I remember them saying, if you don't fight for your kids, who's going to fight for them? And the reality is you got to go ask. You got to ask the question so you can tell your parents and tell your staff that you went and did the best. But you just got to understand that the result's not always going to be what you want it to be. And sometimes different competitions have different answers on what they give. Sometimes it's a cookie cutter answer and it's not what you want to hear. But the reality is you have to ask because you want to do what's best for your program and for your kids. So yeah. I love the fact at the Cheer Expo that we have awesome people that'll talk to you generally within 5 or 10 minutes at a competition to be able to answer your questions on your score sheets, to be able to talk about specific things, even the things you're not supposed to talk about. We still are willing to talk about those things because it helps coaches get better. The review process is a huge part of what we do. That's been a great thing for MotUS. And, we're trying to give a little bit extra at our events, but the reality is coaches know more than judges, and they're not always going to like the answer they get. And sometimes you just have to be mature enough to be able to live with that. You want to do what's best for your program, but you're not always going to get the answers that you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, one thing we stress to our coaches, and we say it over and over, be quick to see where the judges are right, because we instantly want to go into defense mode, because once again, it's personal. I made up that. I worked with those kids on their jump, so it becomes personal. And then, you show up in AccuScore and like you said, you get heated. But read those comments and take into account, probably a whole nother podcast, but a major issue I think we have in scoring is everybody ties. So, I was looking at a big event we were at the other day, and there were 10 teams deep in a world's division, and all 10 teams scored the exact same thing on jumps. And I'm like, really? All 10 of those teams jumped it. There's no way,
Yeah.
But you've got a score sheet that, man, just everybody stacked on top of each other. And all it takes is, one little thing. And then, to Kevin's point, one little thing, or one judge sees one thing or doesn't see another thing. And then that affects, your score or your placement or what you believe to be true.
I'm making a note because I do think that we need to do just an entire 1 hour podcast on scoring. It could probably be like a Joe Rogan 3 to 5 hour podcast, to be honest.
To me, it's the most important subject in what we do, because to Kevin's point, the NFL does mess it up, but they also spend millions of dollars trying to get it right, or at least say they do. So, that's a thing of like, this is the most important thing that they get right at a competition. It's awesome when you run on time. It's awesome when the logistics are good. It's awesome when the backdrop and all the lights and everything looks great. But if you don't get it right, especially getting those placements right, then, programs are spending a lot of money to come to these events, and that should be their expectation to get it right. But when you're up against a score sheet where literally it's so easy for everybody to get the same score, it's tough to get it. It can be tough to get it right. So the judges are not always put in the best position either.
Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about MotUS?
Well, MotUS is a community of gym owners working together to help each other grow. As a member of MotUS, you can get access to our Gym Owners Vault, which includes templates for every aspect of your business. We continue to add new resources constantly. In addition, you're also added to a private VIP owners Facebook group, as well as the opportunity to join monthly webinars. There's no webinars. Webinars geared towards gym owners. You'll also receive amazing discounts from our affiliate members. We have about a dozen members specifically in competition with the Cheer Expo, Choice Events, All Out Brands, and the Spirit Network. We also have deals with Infinity, Vault Event Media, Cheer Sounds, Bookshop Fundraising, and many more. Join the movement today at www.joinmotus.com. Hopefully they know how to spell join and MotUS by now, but it's JOINMOTUS.com. Okay, was that a long enough pause? Okay, great.
That was good.
I get instructions from Stacy, and I get a little scared when we don't do it right. So she talked earlier about what you say about being intimidated by others. So Cole, Casey, no intimidation. Stacy,
and
lots of
face
intimidation.
it, Kevin, you're not that great at following instructions. So.
Okay, that touche. That's very valid. So.
You have to first read the instructions to then be able to follow them. So
there are so many emails, y'all. I get a billion emails in my life daily, and 50% of them are from Stacy Rowe. So it's really hard sometimes. I take that back. 25% from Jenna and 25% from Stacy. So it is a lot. Okay, I got an awesome dad joke. And so, what did the duck say when he bought chapstick?
What?
Put it on my bill. I I just realized I put on
for some
chapstick
reason,
about
I
2
don't know if
minutes
it's
ago.
been the weather, and I didn't used to do this, but I've started carrying chapstick everywhere. My lips are always chapped. So that's a good joke for me.
I
like
always
it.
have chapstick. So I have chapstick. I have chapstick by my desk. I have chapstick upstairs in my bathroom. I have chapstick in my purse. I have chapstick at work.
I am a non-believer in the chapstick. I'm the guy that's like, hey, if you start using that, then your lips don't.
You have not had the right chapstick.
Yeah. I got a text this morning from my friend in my hometown of Sheridan, Wyoming. It's 18 below.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. Horrible.
That's some chapped lips.
That's like terrible.
He said, this is why you don't live here anymore. I was like, that's one of the reasons. Yes. So.
All right, gentlemen. So let's share a few stories. We can each share a story maybe of just some of our hardest moments, examples of some of our hardest things we've had to deal with at competition.
Well, I'll start. I've got one that still hurts me till this day. One of my favorite kids that I ever coached. And it was her senior year. She was fantastic. Great cheerleader. Had double fulls, front center of our dance. Had all the skills that you could ever imagine a girl having. We were having a really good year, and it was her senior year. And after day one at Cheersport, randomly enough, after day one at Cheersport, we were in first place, and it was a big moment for us. We were ahead of Stingrays, World Cup, Cheer Extreme. Like all the players were there. And again, this is 15 plus years ago. And we were so excited. We were like, holy cow, wow. And the other teams had some mistakes. So it was still going to be tough to win the event. We knew what we were up against. So we're in the warm-up room, on day two. And literally on her last warm-up pass, she blows her knee out doing a double full in the warm-up room at Cheersport. And it just crushed my heart because, again, at that moment, you can't replace her. At that point with just 30 minutes left in warm-up, is that she's front of the, point of the dance, one of our main people in the entire routine. It's like, we're done. And she bawled and bawled and bawled her eyes out. And I remember, I think his name was Keith, Kevin, that used to run your warm-up room.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he came out and I said, I was emotional. I was like, man, I need to talk to Kevin. He's like, no, I can handle it. Kevin's busy. I said, dude, tell Kevin that I want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to anybody else. And to Kevin's credit, he showed up 5-10 minutes later, thankfully. But there was nothing to do. It just, it was like just such a deflating moment. And I felt so bad for her, all the other girls on the team, because, that would have been a big moment for us to actually win and beat those other teams that we were against. So that was a tough one.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I think we've all experienced an athlete that's blown their knee out either on stage or in the warm-up room. I would imagine the four of us coaching as long as we have that, we've all had that happen. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for the athlete. It's heartbreaking for the team. It sucks because it's out of your control. There's nothing you can do.
Yep. It's terrible. You see it in all sports, on the football field, on the whatever, these people that just season's over in a matter of seconds. So.
Well, I'll tell mine. So many years ago, I was coaching teal, and I had a girl on my team. She was one of my favorite kids. Her name was Danielle Jones, and now Danielle Crossland. She got married. So her sophomore year in high school, she blew her knee out, her right knee, and it was a struggle. So she did not finish the year, obviously, and it happened right before WCA at Christmas time. So she was out for the rest of the year. She came back her junior year competing, literally went through the whole season. And right before we went to NCA, she blew out her knee again. I was like, I couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it happened 2 years in a row. And so she's like, I'm done. I'm never cheering again. I was like, hey, I totally get it. And so she came back from rehab into her senior year. And she was like, I think I want to finish the year. She's like, I just don't think I can tumble like I was. And I said, hey, totally understand. We'd love to have you on the team. So literally, she's on the team her senior year, and she injures her knee for a third year in a row.
Wow.
And I was like, and she wasn't even tumbling. It was just too weak. So she was like our point flyer. She was our point dancer. She was our best jumper. She had literally, she'd been in our gym for years. She was one of our best athletes ever. And so that knee, she did not have surgery that senior year. And so she was able to come back with a brace. And so we put her in the routine about a month leading up to Worlds. And all she did was fly. And she was our main flyer. She was able to do it. So even in dance, like she couldn't do it. Like she would walk back to the back of the routine and nugget. And she couldn't even bend down all the way because of her knee. But she was literally in the center section of the floor. She did that part of pyramid. She was the point flyer. And then she would back up and the whole routine flowed around her. But it was worth having her. And that was the year we got second at Worlds with Danielle not doing hardly anything. That was in 2006. And it was a pretty crazy year. We lost to Cheer Athletics Panthers, but we beat Maryland Twisters World Cup and Cheer Extreme that year. And so that was one of our many seconds at Worlds. And that was with Danielle having a bum knee. But that was her senior year. She went on and cheered at Clemson, and she never tumbled again. But she was an amazing flyer and even a better person. And we're still friends with Danielle and her husband, Nick, to this day. They're pretty amazing. They live in Charleston. And
that's awesome.
But 3 knee injuries, 3 years in a row, just the craziest thing. To literally one of my favorite people ever. So heartbreak and awesome all at the same time. So,
yeah, these kids. I mean, it's a tough sport, and obviously those things happen. We train hard to make sure that they don't happen, but sometimes it does, and it's tough to see those kids, especially when you've coached them for a long time. They've been in your program for a long time.
Right.
I think for me, one of the hardest things that I deal with, mine's going to be pretty general. It's not going to be a specific story like Cole or Kevin's, but, I'm just not a person who likes conflict. I'm not a fighter. I kind of run from conflict sometimes. That is a little bit of a character flaw, but I want everybody to get along, and that's important to me. And the thing that kind of bothers me or is heartbreaking to me is when we're at competition and the parents get squabbling, and it's a common thing. Once again, the parents are going through exactly what the coaches and the kids are. A lot of walking, a lot of time. They've spent the entire week driving the kids back and forth to the gym. How am I going to feed them? How am I going to get their hair ready? Like, they're putting a lot into it, and then they become physically and emotionally drained at these competitions. But, a squabble in priority viewing, or a squabble in our team room, or a team has a mistake. I saw that a couple of weeks ago. One of our teams were in first, and then they had a mistake, and it literally took them, like, they went from first to eighth. And this is a great team, and they've won all season. But, then people get to squabbling and fighting over it. And it kind of breaks my heart, because this is for the kids, and we're dealing with kids, and that's what kids make mistakes. Heck, adults make mistakes as well. You look at a routine and there are so many moving parts. It's amazing that anyone ever hits a routine at all. Think of all the different, like sometimes 38 people on a floor. We're all going to tumble around and do these stunts and not run into each other and not fall down and do thousands of different movements. So it's tough to go out there and hit this, but it's really heartbreaking when everybody pours all this time and energy into it, and then the parents get upset and start squabbling with each other. So I think those have been some of my hardest moments of having to stop, having to not go and enjoy the next team, or maybe even my own kids' team, or just have it rent space in my head, just, dealing with when parents are squabbling. So,
right.
I agree,
or coaches,
Casey.
or anybody for that.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I feel like we've all dealt with that too. I actually had, I think for me, you guys know my personality well enough. And while you might think that I like conflict, I don't like conflict, but I understand the importance of dealing with the conflict. But
I feel like Casey's nothing but conflict in my life. So I'm surprised he said that.
Oh my goodness. So I feel like I will try to be calm and patient and allow things to kind of roll off my back. And I really do try to be patient. And I think along the lines of what you're talking about with parents, like I've had some moments where I've reflected back, or it's rented space in my head for days after the fact, because I got to a point where I was like, okay, like the patience has worn thin. I snap, and I'm like, enough with you. Like, you need to get out. You need to pack up your stuff and go home. And I've done that before, because I've gotten so aggravated that I'm like, there's nothing I can do that's going to fix the situation. And your squabbling is just, it's not good for anybody. So just get out, altogether, just go, goodbye. And I don't like doing that. So I've had those moments, but I think you actually touched on it there at the end, the coaches. I think that's one of the hardest things. That it's additionally, they're all hard things, but one of the hardest things is dealing with coaches especially when they're fighting about credit, or who's, responsible for the success, or, I want credit for the choreography because I'm the choreographer, but really it's been a group effort, or, I'm the winner because I've coached this team that won, but was a lot of other coaches that also put in the effort to help make that team successful for whatever reason. And so I think trying to keep everybody grounded and realizing that, if you don't care about who gets the credit, that's really when we're most successful, and trying to create that kind of culture where your coaches are selfless and wanting to help, and, where they take that pride and passion and put it on their own back, and that ownership, yes, but that they recognize, that it is a group effort and that everybody contributes. I mean, the grandma sitting in the audience that tells me that, Shana, I don't understand that. I've had this happen before. I didn't understand the last 8 count of that dance that you did there. And I'm like, my husband's walking behind me and he's like, can you believe she said that to you? And I'm like, well, look, she's a spectator. She's watching it. I'm going to go back and revisit that 8 count now and see, like, what didn't she understand? How can I make grandma enjoy this this last 8 count? But I think just working with the coaches and trying to keep the coaches on the same page. I think that if you have your staff kind of internally fighting for that limelight or the spotlight, or I'm the superstar of the staff, that becomes very toxic for your program. And I've been through that before, and it's harmful. So it's
the key word you said there that I picked up on is help. I feel like everybody needs help. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to ask for help and then to accept help, and I will never forget this. A couple of years ago, we had a team and they were struggling, and the coaches there were struggling. And, I'm like, can we get y'all some help? And no, we got such and such that wants to come in and they're going to help y'all out on this part. Anyway, it took about a month to get this, but then the coach came out and said, listen, I don't want help, because then I'm not doing my job. If I have to get help, then I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing my job. And I said, actually, I believe that to the contrary of that, I think it is your job to get help. But that's human nature. I've had the same discussions. I mean, my oldest daughter, Emily, I remember when she was in college, and she cheered in college. So she had all the advantages of being an athlete in college. She could have all the tutoring, and then I'm like, are you using the tutor? Well, no. If I use a tutor, I'm stupid. And I'm like, no, sweetie, you're actually stupid if you don't use the tutor, Right. But our human nature tells us, if I've got to go get somebody to help me, then I'm not adequate. I'm weak,
right?
Yeah. So anyway, with that, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Cheerfest. I would love
best camp ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Attend the premier residential
Cheerfest, what?
Premier residential summer camp for cheerleaders of all ages and all levels. Cheerfest has top professional instructors from across the country. Campers aged 7 to 17 will learn from and train with the best at Cheerfest. Athletes are broken into groups, so they receive the highest quality of instruction in jumps, tumbling, flexibility, dance, and conditioning, while enjoying the ultimate camp experience. Join us at Cheerfest for 6 fun-filled days of cheerleading and activities while making lifelong friends and memories. Please register at cheerfest.com. Once again, that's cheerfest.com, CHEERFEST.com.
It really is an awesome camp, and we're looking forward to getting ready for it in a couple weeks, I guess.
My
months.
Favorite place to be. I love it.
Yeah, it's super exciting, super awesome. So I want to touch on a quick point. because I think it applies to the topic here, and I think that it's an important point. So I'm going to make it. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, there's probably more losers than winners in our sport, right? Because there's only one winner at the end of the day, and everybody else, if you're not first, you're last, right? I mean, I don't necessarily believe that. I think there's a lot to be learned from all the places that you might gain, but the point is, there's only one winner.
Bobby.
Right. There's only one winner, and there might be 10 teams in the division. I think that when your program, shifts from that constant, like you're working to win, and then you become a winning program and you're winning a lot of things like worlds or your postseason events, summit, whatever, pick your event, NCA, cheer sport, whatever. You're winning those events. Your program culture tends to shift a little bit. And if you're not prepared for that, it can actually be toxic. So I think that it's funny because I feel like I don't know that the industry so much has this feeling today, but I do feel like we went through a period of time in our industry where everybody thought, oh, if I'm just winning, if my teams are winning, then everybody's going to come to my gym, and my gym just needs to be a winning gym. And the reality is, and Casey can speak to this maybe, but I feel like as a winning gym, there's a whole different set of issues to deal with, I feel like, because that becomes the expectation. And I think that, I mean, in fairness, your coaches, your parents, and your athletes, I think they can also become cocky from all of that winning if you are not prepared to kind of wrangle that in and stay focused on the culture that you built, because your culture is not winning. Your culture is something else. And I just think that is an important thing to note. And I've lived that too. And I wish I had known that when I was living it, because I would have done a better job of making sure that we stayed true to our culture and not allowed it to kind of spiral out of control with the cockiness, if you will. You can be confident. You can gain the confidence from the winning, and that's great. Be confident, but not be cocky. And so for people out there, when that time comes, like just be ready for that. Yeah. And hopefully this will help you navigate that better.
In over 20 years of being in business and being Stingrays, I feel like we've gone through a lot of those things, because we had incredibly successful years in the early days. And you get this confidence, this swagger, which those can be great things. But then there comes an expectation, and here we are 24, about to go into our 24th season later. And there are people that show up at our door and, hey, we're going to put on the blue and green and we're going to win everything. And it just doesn't happen. Like I said, it's Junior 2 division with 75 great teams in there that are all loaded to the max. If you can get in the top 10 and make finals at an end of the season event, like, you've done something, and you've accomplished something.
Right.
So, that's the thing. We do play to win. We want to be competitive. That is part of our program. But the days of showing up at any competition and sweeping the event, I just don't see that happening anymore. And we don't want it to happen. That's the thing. We want great competition. So if you want to be competitive, to me, competitive is that you are in the mix with other great teams. Competitive is not that you showed up and there were two inexperienced, out of level teams in your division, and you walked away with it and won by 10 points. So we love I love the competition. I remember Kevin saying this years ago to us. He was like, everybody will tell you that they love competition, but then those are some of the first people calling me trying to move out of y'all's division. So
people love competition if they can win. So there's two kind of people. They want competition as long as they can beat everybody, or then they don't want competition. So it's like it's a rare breed that people want competition regardless of how good or high level a competition is. So
yeah. Well, to summarize, winning, I feel like, breeds a different type of energy and mentality in your facility, which is not a bad thing, but you need to be prepared for what that energy brings along with it and how to deal with that. And I feel like I said, if I had known that at the time when I was living through it, I would have done a better job. It's one of my career regrets, is not knowing that little little fact before I got there. So, okay, well, boys, it's time for our Simon Sinek quote, because we always have to pay homage to Simon.
Woo-woo.
And today's quote is, customers will love a company until customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. So what are your thoughts?
I think that's so true. And that, one of the things, especially in all the businesses that we're involved with, is a large part of our product, because we don't actually make anything. We're not making tires and selling them, or we're not making cell phones and selling them. We're only as good as our staff and our employees and the people that we work with. And it all comes, from culture. And I think it starts at the top. In some of the different companies that we're involved with, we've got Stage 8 has a different culture than Premier, has a different culture than Cheerfest, has a different culture than Cheer Expo, has a different culture than our MotUS group. Even though there's a lot of crossover in between, they all, and thankfully, they all have a great culture, but they're all just a little bit different. So the point I want to make with that is you can't copy. Stage 8's culture is different than MotUS's culture. But everyone who works for both those companies and are involved in data, they love it, and they genuinely pour their heart and soul into it. But they're created a little bit differently.
Yeah, you're only best at doing what you do. That's the thing. We talk about that a lot too. We look at other programs. We used to really study Spirit of Texas and what they did. And man, they were so good and doing so many great things. But then we realized that we can't do Spirit of Texas better than Spirit of Texas can, So that's the same thing with the culture. You've got to create a great culture that's yours, and within your own company that works for what you're doing. You can look to others for examples, but you can't be them. You've got to create your own thing.
I agree.
That's funny. We used to look at Spirit of Texas as well, because I thought Brett and Brad and Krista were literally, they still are some of the best coaches in the world. And well, I can't duplicate that in Charlotte, but I do have a staff that genuinely loves their kids. They love each other. And we've created an atmosphere where, families are happy. And, but that's funny you said Spirit of Texas, because we think they're pretty amazing as well. So,
well, I've heard that there's been an uptick in the experience at Charlotte this year since Kevin stepped away from coaching. The parents are a good bit more happy. I've actually gotten a couple emails like, hey, thank you for making sure that he's selling so much over here and doesn't have time. So
yeah.
A couple of Facebook messages and things like that. So
I actually always got my inspiration from elsewhere, to be honest. The circus, Cirque du Soleil, I don't know, random widgets and different things and how they worked, and hey, maybe the human body can do this. Let's try it.
I thought you liked the circus so much. That's why you work with us three guys.
Well, yeah. I mean, you guys are my everyday circus for sure. So, well, gentlemen, I think that is a wrap for today. Be sure to follow us on YouTube at the MotUS Edge Podcast, Instagram and X at Join MotUS, and follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like what we're doing and want to hear more, let us know. Good luck to everyone as you wrap up your seasons, and thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Oh, we'll see you in Delaware if you're coming to Cheerfest this weekend.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
God bless you.
Thank you for listening to the MotUS Edge. We hope you had a blast. Join us next week for more on business, leadership, and motivation. Subscribe and follow the show where you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our newsletter at joinmotus.com. The MotUS Edge podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.